Hello everyone, today is Friday, February 2026. I'm Tom Worth, and we've got big news out of the Supreme Court today. I'm sure many of you have already been seeing a lot of videos, commentary, headlines about this, and I've taken a lot of it in, and I wanted to go over what I think is important. And what's important is this Supreme Court asserting what many of us have been just absolutely baffled as to why they refuse to assert this, which is we do have three branches of government. We have a legislative branch and an executive branch, not to mention the judicial branch, and the Supreme Court has seemingly ignored this fact in all of its previous rulings related to Trump, almost all of them. This time they go back and they recognize, yes, we do have a constitution, and the framers did intend certain things to happen, and I wanted to go over a few of those. This is notable because Chief Justice Roberts issued the opinion, wrote the court's opinion, and you had Neil Gorsuch have a concurring opinion, and he calls out some really valid point. I mean, this is just basic. This is basic constitutional law, one would think, but it's so consequential because this Supreme Court has refused to acknowledge that we have the Constitution when it comes to Trump. And just to touch, I have the Supreme Court decision here. It's at supremecourt.gov if you want to get to it yourself. There's just so much there, and I'm not going to go over all of it. I'm going to go over what I think matters. The case itself, if you didn't know, was actually related to our national emergencies. Trump has been trying to use emergency powers to say that we're in a state of emergency, a state of war even, to impose tariffs without consultation of Congress. This is Congress's right, and Congress alone's right is to impose taxes. And a notable thing about this document is tariffs are taxes. Our Supreme Court says throughout, they uses the terms interchangeably. It refers to tariffs as taxes. And when it's talking about tariffs and Congress's power in this, it continually refers to Congress's powers to tax and not the executive's power. So for all of these people like Trump and his advisors saying that tariffs are not taxes, they are. We have the national emergencies that Trump cited were the influx of illegal drugs from Canada, Mexico, and China. That's one foreign threat. And for his executive orders, and the, quote, large and persistent trade deficit. Trump says the first thing created a public health crisis, and the second thing undermined critical supply chains. And the president declared a national emergency as to both threats, deeming them unusual and extraordinary. At no time, and this is noted in the opinion, at no time has the IEEPA in its 50-year existence been used to impose tariffs by a president. No one's ever done it before. So this is Trump just making something up and grasping at straws as to why he's allowed to do this. Throughout these opinions, you will hear in the majority opinion that when it comes to taxes being levied, that is Congress and Congress alone. Congress is never ambiguous about that language. They're always very clear, they're always very explicit as to the powers they are giving the executive, the president. When it comes to tariffs, those powers were never explicitly delegated to the president, even in emergency times. So that is not something that would have just been understood to go to the president. That's why no president has ever tried to do this in 50 years of the IEEPA's existence. So we have held IEEPA does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. The judgment is vacated. That was a lower court case. And the case is remanded with instructions to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction. IEEPA does not authorize the president to impose tariffs, and Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution specifies that, quote, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. The framers recognized the unique importance of this taxing power, power which very clearly includes the power to impose tariffs. And they gave Congress alone access to the pockets of the people. Trump can't keep doing what he's doing anymore. It's all unconstitutional. We've all known this all along. And we have now the big shock of Trump's Supreme Court affirming this. And it was 6-3. Of course, you're never going to get Thomas or Alito, and you're rarely going to get Kavanaugh to go against President Trump. But 2 of 3 Trump appointees went against him in this decision. And that's pretty massive. The other notable thing about Robert's opinion, the opinion of the court, we've also got dissenting opinions. We've also got a few concurring opinions. This is the other important thing, is because this is going to keep Trump from trying to do this again in a different way. He'll have to get Congress's approval to do this. It says, fourth, the historical argument based on the court's wartime precedents fails. All agree the president lacks inherent peacetime authority to impose tariffs. Right there. And it says this throughout. The president has no peacetime authority to impose tariffs. He's got to go through Congress. This is the thing, this is the most damaging thing about this decision, is that Trump has to go through Congress to get this done. And this goes against everything that Trump is trying to do. He could have gone through Congress all along. He has gone through Congress for a very few things, but what he's trying to do in his first year is establish that he doesn't have to ask Congress for permission to do anything. And he's been largely successful in his Supreme Court challenges in accomplishing that stance. This, for the first time, says, no, he does need to go to Congress, at least when it comes to taxation, and that tariffs are, in fact, taxes. I'm going to go to now a few pages of just a few passages from Neil Gorsuch's opinion, which agrees with the opinion of the court. The major questions doctrine performs a similar function. Article 1, this is very important, Article 1 invests all federal legislative power in Congress, and highly resourceful members of the executive branch have strong incentives to exploit any doubt in Congress's past work to assume new power for themselves. Gorsuch, this is where he really personally attacks Trump without saying Trump by name. Again, this is a guy that typically goes with Trump, right? Our founders understood that men are not angels, and we disregard that insight at our peril when we allow the few, parentheses, or the one, to aggrandize their power based on loose or uncertain authority. Does that sound like anyone we know? We delude ourselves, too, if we think that power will accumulate safely and only in the hands of dispassionate, quote, people found in agencies, end quote. That's from a court case that Trump's lawyers cited, trying to justify Trump's agencies are allowed to do things that only Congress is allowed to do when it comes to legislation. Even if unelected agency officials, I mean, there's no mistaking the intent here. Unelected agency officials. He's calling out DOJ, right? He's calling out Trump's advisors. These are unelected people. These are appointees. Even if unelected agency officials were uniquely immune to the desire for more power, an unserious assumption, they report to elected presidents who can claim no such modesty. That's just a slam, right? Okay, back to the thing. Another feature of our separation of powers makes the major questions doctrine especially salient. Blah, 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 blah. Once this court reads a doubtful statute as granting the executive branch a given power, that power may prove almost impossible for Congress to retrieve. That's what he writes. And the reason is, sure, you might say, okay, Congress has delegated this authority to the president, but they can just take it back, right? Well, no, they can't, because in order to take it back, they'd have to pass a law. And who has to sign a law? The president, right? And he's saying, here's what he says. Any president, this is straight from Gorsuch's opinion, any president keen on his own authority, and again, what president isn't, will have a strong incentive to veto legislation aimed at returning the power to Congress. Perhaps Congress can use other tools, including its appropriation authority, to influence how the president exercises his new power. Maybe Congress can sometimes even leverage blah, blah, blah. But retrieving a lost power is no easy business in our constitutional order. And without doctrines like major questions, our system of separated powers and checks and balances threatens to give way to the continual and permanent accretion of power in the hands of one man. That is no recipe for a republic. That's what we've been saying. And we have Neil Gorsuch saying this. This case offers an example of the problem. Blah, 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 blah. It's just so good. It's all so good. 2 more points on this. Okay. This is a shocking one. Not shocking that it happened, but shocking that Gorsuch calls it out in his opinion. He says, that leaves one final camp to consider. I've jumped way ahead. Gorsuch's opinion alone is, like 50 pages or something. We're over on page 40 now. That leaves one final camp to consider. Justice Thomas suggests that Congress may hand over most of its constitutionally vested powers to the president completely and forever. This is what Clarence Thomas writes in his own opinion in this document. As a dissenting opinion. On his view, the only powers Congress may not delegate are those that involve, quote, rules setting the conditions for deprivations of life, liberty, or property. From this rule, it follows that Congress may give all its tariff powers to the president because importing is a matter of privilege, and as a result, this case does not implicate any separation of powers concerns at all. He continues, it is a sweeping theory, one that would require us to reimagine much of our case law addressing Article 1's vesting clause. And this is the insanity that Neil Gorsuch has to deal with and the rest of the Supreme Court. Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas have to go. They have to be impeached. They have to be removed. Supposedly Alito is going to retire sooner than later, before the next term starts in October, in order to allow Trump to appoint yet another lifetime Supreme Court appointee. He's not going to make the mistake that he made with 2 of his other ones. He's going to find a couple of Alito and Thomas starter kits. But that's for another day. I've got one more point on this. Over here on page 46. Okay, this is his summary. This is Gorsuch's summary, and it's pretty great. This is page 46. This is the end of Gorsuch's opinion, and this is what sums up the whole problem that's been facing us all along with this Republican Congress and Trump in the White House. And Gorsuch just nails it, I think. And I think this is why this is such a huge decision, not necessarily for, it should have been 9-0, right? A lot of people are saying that the reason this took a little bit to come out is, even though it was 6-3, it was just a slam dunk case. There's no question about the unconstitutionality of Trump's imposition of these tariffs he's doing. But that Roberts wanted this to be 9-0. And he kind of quickly realized Alito and Thomas are never going to come around on this, and then just gave up on Kavanaugh. Here's how Gorsuch sums it up. For those who think it important for the nation to impose more tariffs, I understand that today's decision will be disappointing. All I can offer them is that he's seeing that this goes beyond tariffs. All I can offer them is that most major decisions affecting the rights and responsibilities of the American people, including the duty to pay taxes and tariffs, are funneled through the legislative process for a reason. Yes, legislating can be hard and take time, and yes, it can be tempting to bypass Congress when some pressing problem arises. But the deliberative nature of the legislative process was the whole point of its design. Through that process, the nation can tap the combined wisdom of the people's elected representatives, not just that of one faction or man. Their deliberation tempers impulse, and compromise hammers disagreements into workable solutions. And because laws must earn such broad support to survive the legislative process, they tend to endure, allowing ordinary people to plan their lives in ways they cannot when the rules shift from day to day. In all, the legislative process helps ensure each of us has a stake in the laws that govern us and in the nation's future. For some today, the weight of those virtues is apparent. For others, it may not seem so obvious. But if history is any guide, this is where the tables will turn, and the day will come when those disappointed by today's result will appreciate the legislative process for the bulwark of liberty it is. I couldn't have said it any better myself, Mr. Gorsuch. Thank you. And thank you, Supreme Court, for finally rising to the occasion. This should put to bed Trump's imposition of tariffs as a cudgel, as they say. He will find a way to get some of these through Congress, no doubt. Aluminum and steel were passed through Congress, so those aren't being overruled, but most of the other stuff is. The days of Trump having a conversation with someone and doesn't like their face, so he raises their tariffs, but then gets some gold bars and a Rolex from them, so lowers the tariffs. Those days are over, as they should have never started. So, reason for a lot of happiness today. Even if you're on the other side, even if you think Trump should have unlimited power, and a third of the country does, good news for you too. Your prices will be going back down a bit. Good news for everyone here. Okay, that's it for today. Like and subscribe if you would. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the support. And we will talk to you all later.